Ontar's log, 13th day of Gainado, 2,000 years after sunfall. The days have come to move slower with every entry in this log, but nonetheless, I see light on the horizon for my current course of events. With everything going on, I almost forgot. It's my birthday today. Here I am, in the heart of the land of my enemies, my greatest foe only miles away, getting closer to his true form with each waking moment, living in another time than my own, trained for every occurrence before me, and yet I am still continually surprised. I should never have signed up for this. Magic, gods and genies. This is not my alley. Still, my superiors require a report, and this journal is my only way of communicating with them. Well, you. So here's last session. The day began with Tebby, Cambrum, and Balazar at the library of Frodrin. Balazar, the brass dragonborn, continues to seek power so that he may one day slay Shahida the genie and save his dear friend, Amphi the sea dragon, as he calls her. Tebby, a paladin of Frodrin, helped him along that morning, perhaps unknowingly, by giving him access to a book on dark idols and trinkets. He spent much of the rest of the day occupied by the book and keeping out of trouble as he devised a plan to swallow these magic-infused items and gain their power. I personally stay away from these sorts of cursed objects just in general, but to swallow them whole? If there's one thing I've learned about Balazar, he has gut, and he cares deeply for his friends. The lengths he goes to for Amphi are to be respected, even if a bit outside the box at times. Following the library, Tebby, Cambum, and Balazar, with book in hand, headed off to the religious district in search of Rogar, the silver dragonborn. Rogar, a follower of Jotrin, had woken early that morning to seek wisdom from the local clergy, or something or other. Only one in the temple was awake, though, to be fair, she was barely awake. Still, even through her droopy eyes, she could see that Rogar was changing. His scales were dimmer, but more defined than they had been the previous day. One well-versed in dragonborn physiology as myself would describe it as more dragon-like, to use a scientific term. Rogar went on to tell the other follower about a dream he had, where he had new fantastical abilities, but had lost some that he came to rely on. All of it leads me to believe that the coming of Tiamat is accelerated in this timeline, though more observation is needed. Honestly, I find the Light Cleric quite a great guy once you get to know him. Even though he is misguided at times, and at other times is held back by his worries, the Dragonborn does always want to do the right thing. For example, he noticed the other follower was very tired, very sleepy, so Rogar proceeded to forcefully put her to sleep against her will. Not what I would have done, but at least his heart was in the right place. Amusingly, she was supposed to give morning prayer, but with her asleep, the responsibility fell onto Rogar, being that he was the next highest-ranking individual. He tried to avoid the responsibility, but was eventually forced into it. Though I'm not much of a religious individual, I will say he led that mass excellently. Arriving in the religious district later that morning, Tebby and Cambrum went inside the temple, leaving Balazar outside with his book. They too witnessed the excellent prayer, though eventually Tebby, being a good friend, saved Rogar from the stage and escorted him out of the temple. The Minotaur wanted to publish his prayers in a book, very excitedly talking to Rogar about the prospect, who, to his credit, politely smiled and nodded at the idea as she went on. Tebby is new to the party. It would do me well to better get to know her. She's currently a wild card. Not like a Balazar wild card, mind you. Just unpredictable. I'm curious as to whether she knows of Rogar's true nature, and that is the source of her interest in him. More observation needed. Meanwhile, to the temple incident, Bianca and myself headed off for the Bloody Town Inn, which I was convinced was some sort of underground fighting arena or something. I was quite worried for the young child with me as we approached such an environment, but we went on nonetheless. After asking a few more people for directions and entering an alleyway, we were ambushed by a woman with a crossbow. Within a moment, I had her on her back foot, ready to flee, when Bianca busted out, "We're here to see Kripoth," to which the woman, who turned out to be a half-elf, escorted us to the inn. We laid down our weapons and engaged in conversation with the three crewmates as we waited for Kripoth, the Keeper of Secrets, to arrive. Amusingly enough, during that time, the other four of the party were actually meeting with Kripoth, among others, to speak with the deceased Flarden, an undead vampire elf child who was killed by the genie Shahida before the boy could be brought back to the Empire. Long story. But the boy's reconstructed skull, kudos to Nicholas the Dwarf for that one, and the skull of a wight which Balazar happened to be carrying as a trophy, Those present found out that there were tens of thousands of elven vampires of Balkos, seeking a goal that is unknown but destructive enough for Aspera to seek Rakanoth's aid in dealing with it. Following this, the four left, seeking Micah and I at the inn in the ground which we had stayed at the previous night. Eventually, back at the Bloody Town Inn, Kripoth arrived. Bianca grotesquely changed forms to Micah, at which I had to actually turn away, and proceeded to engage in a tense dialogue with the Keeper of Secrets. There was much exchanged, too much to note down here, but each seemed to get the information they were after. In a stroke of fate, Micah walked away from the conversation as a crew member of Kripoth's, and a spy whose sole job was to keep Balazar occupied. It sounds amusing, I know, but there is good reason to hire someone for that task, as I'm sure you would know, based on my previous entries. Before we left the inn, I decided to take the opportunity to ask a question of my own to the Keeper of Secrets. After getting past the good old, "If you know who I am, then why am I still alive?" routine, I asked about my father. Turns out he is indeed alive, somewhere on this side of the strait. That my father would have escaped the knight's clutches doesn't surprise me, yet it still... well, I guess it surprised me. The worrisome part is less about where he is, though, and more about the fact that to find more information, I have to consult Balazar about the Weirven Knights, who, to my knowledge, he doesn't know much about. Still, it's a start. After the meeting with Kripoth, Micah and I linked up with the others, exchanging a short dialogue. Tebby seemed upset with Micah and I for some reason, stomping off to a meeting shortly after. Oh, and I shouldn't forget to note, I had grown rather attached to the absence of constant Ontar's fault this, and, well, if Ontar just hadn't that. But upon my return to the main party, this resumed, as expected. What I didn't expect, though, was Micah joining in. I was wrong to think that something might have changed. But hey, it's still my birthday. That's something to be happy about. Though, come to think of it, is it really still my birthday if I went back in time to a day of the year which is different than which I left? And would I be getting older, or do I lose years for going backwards? But then again, I went back to before I was born, so... This concludes Ontar's log, January 23rd, 2021.